Have you ever entered a new game and, as you looked into the distance, couldn't help but ask yourself, I wonder what's over there? Not because you just picked up a quest that told you to go there, not because you knew there was a reward waiting for you, but simply because you wanted to know? Maybe it was a mountain far off in the distance, a strange tower glowing on the horizon, or, following the oldest rule in video games, there's a waterfall, so there's gotta be treasure behind it. Some games have this strange ability to make you forget your original objective entirely. They don't force you to explore, they simply make curiosity impossible to ignore. You stop following the map and start following your own instincts. I think that is one of the rarest and most beautiful achievements in game design, and no game has lately reminded me of that feeling more than Guild Wars 2. Let's talk about it. When people talk about exploration in games, they usually end up talking about the size. How big is the map? How many locations are there? How long does it take to get from one side to the other? But I don't think any of those things actually make a game feel exploratory. Sure, it's nice to simply have more, but what if that more is just there to impress you with its scale, while having very little to say overall? After all, you can have the biggest map ever created and still spend your entire time running from marker to marker, crossing barren landscapes without ever once looking at the world around you. Maybe because there simply isn't anything interesting enough to even make you look. Likewise, some of the smallest worlds I've ever played felt endless, simply because they kept making me ask one simple question. I wonder what's over there. To me, exploration has never been about movement. It's about curiosity. That desire to discover something you didn't expect to find. Movement is simply the act of getting somewhere. A journey doesn't become memorable because it's long. It becomes memorable because the world gives you reason to stop along the way. Not because it takes you hours to reach your destination. And as we discovered in my last video, that you definitely should watch, curiosity is the reason you wanted to go there in the first place. I think that's an important distinction to make, because the moment you're only moving from objective to objective, you're no longer exploring, you're just navigating. You already know where you're going. You already know why you're going there, and just like this, the mystery disappeared before the journey even began. If your minimap ends up looking like someone spilled a box of colorful cereals all over it, maybe the game is trying just a little too hard, right? Real exploration begins the moment you step off the path, when you see something interesting in the distance and think, you know what, I'm going over there. Not because the game promised you a reward, but because something sparked your curiosity. And I think that's the feeling many modern games struggle to create. Not because their worlds are too small, not at all, but because they don't trust us to discover them on our own. And this is where Guild Wars 2 does something that genuinely surprised me. It doesn't constantly pull you by the arm, pointing at the map marker telling you where to go next or what you should be doing for the best reward. Instead, it slowly teaches you something else. It teaches you to listen to your curiosity and to think differently, to think for yourself. From the very beginning, the game feels less like a checklist of objectives and more like a world that reacts when you decide to pay attention to it. Sure, there is the adventure guide that points you toward things you could do next, but it never feels like the only thing you're allowed to do. You're not pushed down a single efficient path, you're simply placed in a world and given the freedom to notice things. I still remember my first time in Caledon Forest. I was just wandering, learning the game, when suddenly a large group of players rushed past me, heading deep into the swamp. No explanation, no warning. And out of instinct, I just followed them. And what I stumbled into wasn't a quest hub or a scripted moment I had been directed towards. It was a world boss event. A full-scale fight happening in real time with players I had never met, all working together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Coming from other MMOs, I honestly thought I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to touch yet. But then someone told me I could just join and even get rewarded for it. Me, a new player, just walked out of character creation, actually participating in something that mattered. I didn't really know what to think of it at that time, but the moment changed something subtle in how I looked at the game. Because after that, I started noticing more and more of these exact situations. And trust me when I tell you, that wasn't the last time something like that happened. Throughout the base game and the first 2 expansions which I played, things like these kept appearing over and over. Just because I thought, hey, what's going on over there? I ended up raiding an entire city of gold with a massive group just because I stopped by a door in the middle of the Maguma jungle as I saw a bunch of other players getting ready for something I didn't know. I have been warped into a small separate dimension which I still do not understand just because I saw a cool glowing portal thing and decided to throw some rocks at it since it was an event that randomly popped up on the map. And the funny thing is, I never really planned any of this. It just happened because I chose to follow curiosity instead of efficiency. And that is the pattern Guild Wars 2 keeps repeating. Not through instructions, but through moments. Small invitations to participate in a world that keeps moving whether you understand it or not. A true, living world. And over time, that changes how you play. You stop asking, what do I need to do? And instead start asking, what is happening over there? If there is one thing Guild Wars 2 completely redefines compared to other MMOs, it's movement. But not in the way you might expect. At first glance, mounts are exactly what you'd think they are. Faster ways to get from point A to point B. But the longer you spend in the world, the more you realize something strange. They don't just change how you move through the world, they change how you see it. Take the Springer, for example. Suddenly, cliffs stop being obstacles and become questions. How do I get up there? And the answer is no longer a detour or a marker on the map, it's a jump. A small moment where the world and your movement finally connect in a way that feels physical, instead of just guided. With the Griffin, height stops being something you avoid and becomes something you actively look for. You want to climb a mountain just to leap off it again. Not because you need to go somewhere, but because the descent itself becomes the experience. The glide, the speed, the momentum. Suddenly the journey downward is just as important as anything at the top. The skimmer turns water from a barrier into a new path, letting you glide across it instead of going around it. The jackal makes deserts feel less empty because the sand itself becomes something you can actually interact with and not just pass through. What I find fascinating is that none of these mounts remove exploration. They reshape it. They don't ask you to ignore the world and rush through it now. They change how you engage with it completely. In most games, faster movement usually means you see less of a world. You skip over it, you optimize your route until the environment becomes something to minimize instead of experience. But here, mounts somehow lead to more curiosity. Because each one quietly changes the question you start asking yourself. What's up there? What's across that gap? What happens if I go down there? Can I glide through that ruin? Even getting from one place to another stops being something you try to minimize. It becomes part of the experience. And I think that's the real design philosophy hidden underneath it all. Guild Wars 2 doesn't just give you mounts to move faster. It gives you mounts to notice more. And in doing so, they stop being about efficiency and start becoming another form of exploration entirely. After all that, I think what Guild Wars 2 really does is something very simple. It trusts you. It trusts you to notice things, to get distracted, to ignore the obvious path and follow something that just looked interesting for no reason at all. And that trust changes everything. Because when a game trusts the the player starts trusting themselves again, trusting their curiosity, their instincts, trusting the idea that maybe they don't need to optimize every second they spend inside a world meant to be explored. And I think that's something a lot of modern games accidentally lose. Or maybe even intentionally. Not just because they want to control you and how you spend your time in game, but because they're afraid you might miss something. So they add markers, checklists, guides, efficiency systems, ways to make sure you don't quote-unquote waste your time. But in doing that, they also remove something. The need to pay attention. Guild Wars 2 does the complete opposite. It doesn't remove structure, it just stops forcing you to follow it. And that is where the magic comes back. Because once you're no longer being told what matters, you simply start deciding for yourself again. Suddenly, a hill in the distance becomes interesting. A random group of players becomes a reason to follow them. A world boss you didn't plan to fight becomes a memory you didn't expect to create. And none of it is efficient. But it feels real, in a way efficiency never quite manages to be. And maybe that's Guild Wars 2's secret. Not better rewards, bigger maps, or more content, but trust. Trust between the world and the player. That is what makes your journey through Tyria something to remember. Because after all, as you say it in the very first moments of the game, this is your story. And that's all I got for today. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little trip into the more philosophical side of gaming and maybe even took something out of it. Let me know in the comments again down below how you liked it, and hey, share a story or two if you want. I'm always looking forward to reading them. I hope you enjoyed this bit more different type of video than usually. I can't do a deep dive every time, come on. But this one is something from the heart, okay? Now then, take care. See you in the next video, and most important, enjoy the journey.